So it's no secret that Halo 4 is one of the most divisive games in the series. Over the last year or two, it's become more and more liked by the community, and for the most part, I really appreciate most of what the game tried to do. The story I found really engaging, and overall just really enjoyed a different take on the Halo universe. The campaign itself I found mostly fun with a few flaws here and there, and Forge I even thought was decent. However, as it's widely known, most of the game's problems lie in its multiplayer. The game's take on Call of Duty-esque multiplayer, including things like ordnance drops and loadouts, was a terrible decision that simply wasn't Halo. However, there's another part of the multiplayer that I feel is kind of forgotten today, and I never really see anyone in the community ever mention Spartan Ops. A big part of this is probably because a lot of people weren't fans of it, and it even seems that 343 themselves tried to sweep everything about it under the rug in Halo 5. So I thought it'd be fun and just pretty interesting to look back on the Spartan Ops mode from Halo 4. Everything from its implementation, to the story, to the missions themselves, and just how it impacted the series moving forward. So without further ado, let's get started. So I, like most people in 2012, was eagerly awaiting the release of Halo 4. I had my limited edition pre-ordered, and I remember around a week before the game released, watching the trailer for Spartan Ops and being incredibly interested. And after rewatching it today, I can definitely see the appeal and sort of the angle they were selling it as. They were really pitching it as a story sequel to Halo 4, with new episodes dropping weekly. They included 5 co-op missions each. And like I said, I can really understand the interest and curiosity at the time. We never had something like this in a Halo game with a weekly episodic story that you can experience with your friends and play through the story you're watching. And yeah, when I first bought the game, I remember being insanely interested in the story and downloading the first episode every week and just playing them with my friends. I had fun with the missions and the story itself at first, and obviously now I can look at it with a more critical eye, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. So, Halo 4 Spartan Ops takes place 6 months after the events of Halo 4, where Chief defeated the Didact, Cortana sacrificed herself, and New Phoenix was composed. But now we follow the UNSC Infinity, and really 2 different groups of Spartan 4s. You're introduced to Fireteam Majestic, who are essentially the protagonist of the story, but not the actual squad you play as. You play as Fireteam Crimson, who are only mentioned and sort of play a role in the story, but not really. I'll go more into that in a sec. But you're introduced to Majestic, which includes Thorn, who is somewhat the main character, Hoya, who's just kind of the cocky guy, Grant, who just really has nothing interesting going on, DeMarco, who's the leader, and Madsen, who is so underdeveloped you will just completely forget he exists. And yeah, in case you can't already tell, this team is really boring. Like, I sorta enjoyed Hoya because I thought he was fun, but Thorn is just so one note and really only defined by caring more than the other Spartans because he had family in New Phoenix. They're essentially all just cliches. That's not like a huge deal to me, but it was kinda disappointing when I first played it. But not wanting to take too much of a deep dive into this, they make their way onto the Infinity and meet up with Lasky and Palmer. Lasky is pretty likable and awesome just like in Halo 4, and Palmer is pretty unbearable also like in Halo 4, especially when Halsey comes in later. And I do just want to point out that I think the cutscenes look really solid, and especially the action scenes which we get a few of throughout the series I really enjoyed. It's just cool seeing a full active Spartan team in combat, which we've really only seen in Reach. Even if the characters are garbage and you don't care about them, they're still fun to watch shoot stuff. But yeah, they bring this artifact on board, and this one doctor gets sucked up by it, which I don't hate him, I know he's fine. I think some people just really hate Dr. Glassman, but I think he's fine. Then they bring Halsey on board, which when I originally played this I was insanely excited for, and I love that Halsey was in a Halo game again, and would hopefully be playing a bigger role. And there are also some scenes I like with her, such as when Thorn is talking to Halsey about the Spartan 2 program, as it's just fun to watch other characters in the Halo universe react to things like that we never really get to think about since we've all just known it for so long. Then we kind of get to another part of the story about Jul 'Mdama and the Elites. And I like that the Elites don't speak English, something about it just feels a little bit more genuine to me. And I like Jul 'Mdama, I think he's cool. I think he serves his purpose mostly well in the story, and I just enjoyed whenever he was on screen, and I found it more entertaining than a lot of the stuff that was going on back on Infinity. And then back to the story on Infinity, I kind of flip-flop on if I cared or not. I was really interested during the Halsey stuff, like when she gets to talking about Master Chief actions in Halo 4, and of course, like I said, Palmer gets incredibly annoying once we get to that event though. And one of my favorite parts of Spartan Ops is actually when the Prometheans invade Infinity. It was sort of scary and just pretty well done, I thought. I just kept thinking though, would this not have been so much cooler to have as an actual mission? We sort of get this as 4 of the chapters are set on Infinity during the invasion, but it still feels really disconnected. Fighting your way to rescue Lasky or Halsey would have just been awesome and actually feel like your missions mattered. And also after this, Thorn gets teleported to Requiem and encounters a couple of elites in a fight that I sort of really hate. It really just signifies how absurdly stupid and giant the new elite designs are. They can't even competently fight, they just try to smash you like they're the Hulk. And then sort of moving towards the end, Palmer is assigned to assassinate Halsey, and Lasky sends Majestic to stop her. And I was actually a little bit curious when I first played this if they would kill her or do something of consequence, and they sorta did, but not really. She lost her arm, but that's about it. Then again, it is nice to have a permanent reminder that Spartan Ops even happened, since all the other stuff has been mostly thrown away. They also introduced this device called the Janus Key that has 2 parts, then whip put together to show every piece of Forerunner technology in the galaxy. The Librarian gives them to Halsey, but Jul 'Mdama grabs it, and Thorn gets the other half. So yeah, that sounds pretty important important in the grand scale of things. It's an interesting device that I feel has a lot of story potential in the future. However, it clearly wasn't mentioned in Halo 5, and I doubt it ever will be again. I mean, maybe there's a small chance in Halo Infinite, but I really doubt it since Jul 'Mdama is dead, and we'll never see Thorn again in the game, probably. But anyways, then Majestic has to disable an artifact, keeping Infinity trapped in Requiem, and then Jul 'Mdama drives into the sun, and that's it. Halsey says she wants revenge, and that's actually the end. So yeah, it's a really odd story that while I thought was fine, didn't really do it for me. I liked the more laid back tone it had, and it had some great ideas, really cool moments, and most importantly, a great setup for the future. But yeah, it just, obviously Halo 5 happened, and due to the poor reception of Spartan Ops, I assume, 343 said screw it, and essentially tried to undo every effect of its story. Jul 'Mdama was killed, Thorn is nowhere to be seen, and Halsey I guess doesn't want revenge on the entire UNSC anymore, and like I already said, the Janus key will most likely never be mentioned again. So yeah, it's a weird section in the Halo universe, but one that I thought could have worked really well. Overall, it's enjoyable, but really has no purpose now, and I just call the whole thing wasted potential. So like I already mentioned, you play as Fireteam Crimson, but the main focus of the story is through Fireteam Majestic, and this creates kind of a weird dynamic that also affects the missions themselves. At least for the first half of the episodes, you don't really feel like what you're doing matters. You just have insanely generic and boring mission objectives that don't feel like they impact the story. There are a few exceptions, such as the last chapter in episode 5, Spartan Thorn, in which you're actually tasked with searching for Spartan Thorn. I enjoyed this as it felt like you were actually part of the story, which like I said is somewhat rare, and Fireteam Crimson also plays a bigger role in the second half, especially towards the end when they have to deactivate one of the two devices, keeping Infinity trapped in Requiem. But that's about it. Again, it's a really weird dynamic that after playing through all the episodes this week, I've been thinking about how it could have been improved. I think the idea of the story-driven mode as opposed to Firefight is sorta cool. Now, do I like Spartan Ops as much as Firefight? Not even close. But it seems they didn't want to fully commit to having what's essentially a smaller campaign-esque side story. That, or they simply didn't have the time or resources to do it, which is understandable. But if you're gonna take the story route, go all the way. Don't make essentially a Firefight survival mode, but disguised as a story. I would have much rather preferred having Reach's Firefight, but with all the customization available in Halo 4. That would have been really cool, and probably a ton of fun. Then again, I do think the idea of a story-driven mode is really interesting. I assume they went this route so you could play with your friends and your Spartan and have it not really affect the lore. Then again, Reach did a very similar thing with just having Noble 6, who we know nothing about and doesn't have a designated look. Maybe have you and your friends Spartans actually be in the cutscenes like in Reach, or just be playing as Majestic so you actually are impacted by the story. Or maybe it would have been possible to include both the Spartan Ops mode and the Firefight survival mode as well. And the reason I say this is because Spartan Ops doesn't ever really feel like what it's aiming to be. Many of the missions just boil down to one simple button press and then eliminating literally over 100 enemies. And with that, we'll move on to more of the missions themselves. So like I've already mentioned, the first 5 episodes I think are really weak. There are 5 missions in each episode, and they can range from 10 to 25 minutes long. Most of the locations are pulled right from the campaign, which I don't have a problem with, but it's the fact that it's the same ones over and over and over again throughout all 25 missions. And after the first episode, you're ready for a change, and that just doesn't ever really come until the second half. And as I already said, the missions themselves are extremely generic. It's just dropping off tons of enemies and making you fight them, which isn't necessarily bad, but it's the fact that they don't really do anything creative with it. It's the same locations, and occasionally you might get some fun weapons or vehicles, but it's sorta rare, and most of the missions don't stand out at all. It is cool that they are co-op, but that doesn't really save it for me. And there are some missions in the first half that I really enjoyed though, like Shootout in Valhalla since the map was a little bit different, and you get to use the Mantis and it was just pretty fun. And like I said, the Spartan Thorn mission is pretty cool from a story level, but it's just as boring and tedious as the others. And pretty much every single one of them is just horrible and legendary. Like, nearly Halo 2 levels of irritation. They're not fun, they're just absolutely terrible no matter how good you are. You mostly just have your loadout weapons, and you will inevitably die a lot. Every time you think the mission should end, they just keep on continuing and it's boring. This isn't to say there's not fun to be had on normal or maybe heroic with a friend or something, but it just really comes across as a disappointment. It does get a little bit better in the second half since the maps are a lot different, and it feels more like a Halo campaign you're playing. The first episode starts with you taken by the Covenant and fighting your way out one of their bases. While it still wasn't that dynamic or interesting, for me it was definitely a step up from the previous 5 episodes, and even though the second half has cooler moments, it sorta goes its own way story-wise just like the first. It sets up these other fire teams like Switchback and Lancer that don't really go anywhere, and continues to feel pretty disconnected until episode 7, which is the Invasion of Infinity, and this I thought was really cool. You were pretty closely interacting with the main story, and most of the episode was spent on Infinity fighting Prometheans. By the last chapter it starts to feel like busy busy work and get a little boring, but I still enjoyed the change of pace from the other episodes though. The 8th and 9th episodes I thought were fine. Again, the change of scenery from the first half is really welcomed, but they eventually start reusing the same new locations over and over and over again. And then the 10th and final episode I thought was really awesome, especially the 3rd chapter, Seize the Power. This felt like pure Halo, where they let you loose in a large environment with great weapons and vehicles and awesome music playing. It felt like a true campaign mission with other Spartan 4s, and you even get to board a Covenant ship at the end. So overall, it was really enjoyable. And even the last chapter, where it probably interacts with the story the most, I thought was pretty cool. You essentially go through all these steps to disable one of the 2 artifacts keeping Infinity trapped, and after you do it, there are all these weird gravity changes that affect you and your weapon reload speed is increased. I just thought it was a lot of fun. And I thought it was cool that it ended in Pelican, right where the episode cutscene picks up. And yeah, that's about it for the missions. I did run into a decent amount of glitches while I was playing on the MCC, so that's probably why, and overall, the missions are fine. There's a few that really stand out and I'd say deserve to be played, but they're lost in a sea of just uninspired and mostly boring missions. So yeah, I think that's about all I have to say about Spartan Ops. It definitely isn't the worst thing in the franchise. The story is interesting at parts, but overall is really lacking for me, and obviously didn't really go anywhere. Again, that's not only the fault of this game, but more of 343's actions in the future, and the missions, as I said, are just mostly boring and feel like busy work. I love the idea of 343 trying something new and different with all these separate co-op missions, and it just really sucked that it wasn't done better, and we'll probably never see something like this in a Halo game anytime soon. Anyways guys, let me know what you think about Spartan Ops, and did you agree with what I had to say? Don't forget to subscribe for more Halo content in the future, follow me on Twitter, and thank you guys for watching.